A single-engine Cessna cleaves the night above Sonora, its instrument panel stripped of every bulb, its transponder ripped out and tossed in a ditch 2 states back. From the ground it looks like an owl crossing the moon, silent, invisible, gone before anyone thinks to aim a flashlight skyward. Inside the cockpit, a pilot everybody calls Aguila takes shallow pulls on a cigarette so the ember won't betray him through the windshield. 600 kilos of cocaine occupy the space where passenger seats once lived, wrapped in heat-sealed bricks that smell faintly of diesel and jungle mud. Ahead, a ranch road has been flattened by bulldozers since lunchtime, camouflaged with sand, and marked by a single flare that will burn for 7 minutes. If Aguila arrives early, the bulldozers are still turning and he has nowhere to land. If he arrives late, the flare dies and the road becomes nothing more than gravel and darkness. Either mistake can kill him, yet he pushes the throttle forward because nothing on earth makes him feel more alive than the instant rubber kisses dirt, and every law ever written stops mattering. You're about to step into the hidden air bridge that feeds North America's drug appetite. Hundreds of clandestine runways scraped onto salt flats and dried riverbeds, thousands of flights flown with no flight plan, and a handful of men who treat fear like jet fuel. In the next 40 minutes you will learn how Mexico's narco pilots are recruited, how they escape radar, what they earn, why most cannot walk away, and what finally breaks even the bravest among them. You will hear confessions never meant for microphones, stories of burned airplanes, midnight ambushes, and tortures so cruel the torturers pray never to suffer them in return. You'll meet wives who sleep beside pistols, mothers who pretend they do not know, and children who inherit nothing but silence. By the end you may decide these aviators deserve every nightmare they endure, or you may wonder how many choices any of us would have made differently with 1 million pesos waving under our nose. Aguila's real dream was passenger airlines. He passed the written exams, logged 100 hours towing banners over Mazatlan's beaches, and calculated that finishing the commercial rating would cost more than his mother's house. A cartel talent scout already knew the number down to the peso. The man waited near the fuel farm, nodded at Aguila's oil-stained overalls, and offered to sponsor the missing hours, if the young pilot agreed to ferry medical supplies from Chiapas to Sinaloa just once, nothing more. The sponsorship came in the form of untraceable cash rolled tight with a rubber band. The medical supplies turned out to be 2 bales of Colombian cocaine so pure it looked like shaved ice. That single errand became the down payment on a future no flight school brochure ever mentions. Narco aviation thrives because the math is ruthless. A private pilot's license in Mexico drains around $15,000 US. A commercial rating climbs past $60,000. Legal jobs for low-hour pilots barely exist. Regional carriers want turbine time, and corporate owners choose retired airline captains with spotless resumes. Meanwhile, a cartel broker will hand a rookie 200,000 pesos, close to 3 years of an average Mexican salary, for one domestic hop lasting less than dawn to breakfast. Add another 0 if the route crosses open ocean or foreign borders. The broker never says cartel aloud. He calls it La Empresa, the company, as if there's an HR department you could complain to when bullets start flying. Most pilots enter the trade through one of 3 doors. The first is debt, student loans, hospital bills, a sick parent. The second is lineage. An uncle flew marijuana in the 70s, an older cousin ferried meth in the 90s. Everyone at family weddings speaks in coded flight levels. The third door is dead ambition. A license but no legal cockpit to sit in, pride that refuses to return to farm work, and an offer too convenient to refuse. Once inside, the hallways narrow. Every successful flight invites a larger payload. Every larger payload buys a nicer truck, a louder watch, a mistress in Culiacan who expects champagne breakfast. The lifestyle becomes a cage lined with velvet. Flying dirty starts with hiding in plain sight. Sinaloa alone hosts hundreds of abandoned fish packing strips, many still listed in dusty federal registries no one bothered to delete. Cartel crews sweep goat droppings off the dirt, shovel fresh aggregate to fill potholes, and disguise the outer markers with scrubs so thick, even Google Earth dismisses them as irrelevant brush. Other strips live on federal highways. Gunmen known as bloqueadors halt traffic at both ends with pickup trucks angled nose to nose, pointing rifles politely downward so dash cams register no obvious menace. For 9 minutes the asphalt belongs to the sky. When the wheels finally lift off with the cargo, Bloqueadors wave commuters through as if the holdup were a routine road repair. Avionics are luxuries narco pilots shed as gladly as old skin. Transponders are liabilities. ADS-B means self-incrimination. The only electronics left in most cockpits are handheld GPS units taped over until the final approach, and satellite phones wrapped in aluminum foil pouches. Even landing lights are stripped. Pilots prefer night vision goggles if they can afford them, moonlight if they cannot. On dark moon runs they memorize the slope of terrain by walking the strip at dusk, counting fence posts like blind men reading Braille, then trusting muscle memory on final descent. One misjudged flare and a tire explodes, sparks become beacons, the desert so generous with cover becomes a stadium of fire. Contraband physics demands sacrilege. Cessna 210s rated for 4,000 pounds routinely rotate at 5,500. King Airs grown 30 knots above redline, their turboprops chewing hot air so thin the bleed air needles flirt with the yellow arc. Pilots wedge sandbags behind rudder pedals to keep the nose from sinking during climb. They carry automotive oil because Aviation 15W50 is harder to source in pop-up camps. Mechanics working under tarps swap out cracked cylinders with used parts scrounged from scrapyards. Torque wrenches are a luxury, and TBO, time between overhaul, is a joke everyone laughs at until crankshafts snap. From the cockpit you learn that Mexican geography is an accomplice anyone can rent for a price. The Sierra Madre Occidental runs northwest like a saw blade, its canyons deep enough to swallow radar, its ridgeline so jagged even heat-seeking missiles struggle to hold lock. Pilots call the corridor La Catedral, the cathedral, because once you slip between those buttresses of rock, your prayers are between you and whatever saints you trust. Some pick Jesus Malverde, the narco saint, whose shrines glitter in Sinaloan suburbs with green bandanas and crushed velvet paintings. Others wear St. Jude around their necks, patron of lost causes. A few trust only aerodynamics and karma lift, thrust, and the hope they never failed to tip a waitress. Cartel logistics run with military precision. A pound of Colombian base paste can change carriers 5 times before it sniffs Mexican air. River canoes haul it from jungle labs to coastal coves. Diesel freighters sail at dusk, hugging shipping lanes so tight the radar echoes disappear into commercial clutter. Short-range DC-3s climb barreling over the Caribbean while ATC controllers in 3 countries assume they belong to somebody else's paperwork. When the cargo finally touches a Mexican beach, dirt bike couriers whip it inland to stash houses guarded by teenagers with gold braces and inherited grudges. Only then do the pilots get coordinates, fuel allowance, and a window of darkness measured in quarter hours. Money is the loudest myth. Newspapers show seized stacks taller than soldiers, $500,000 beach crafts abandoned in soy fields, villas with marble helipads. They rarely mention the invisible expenses. 30% off the top for seguridad, 10% for brokers, another slice for bribes at provincial checkpoints, hush money when a cousin gets arrested, replacement engines after fouled fuel corrodes pistons, funerals when a loader's head pops under a sudden propeller strike. A pilot who grosses 3 million pesos in a year may net less than a mid-career airline first officer, except the airline man sleeps in airport hotels instead of safe houses, sees his kids on weekends, and doesn't flinch when a motorcycle idles too long behind his car at a red light. Psychological interest compounds faster than any peso. Pilots trade tips on how to soothe tinnitus after hours of unmuffled exhaust, how to kill the smell of avgas before hugging their children, how to answer a toddler who asks why daddy never appears in Facebook photos. Their phones run encrypted chats filled with antidotes to fear, St. Michael prayers copy-pasted in 3 languages, memes of skeletons dancing in pilot uniforms, rumors that US satellites now pierce canyon shadows. Nobody ignores rumors. Rumors keep you alive. Some nights rumors come true. Verde, so nicknamed for the emerald ring he twists when nervous, recalls a run where rival sicarios reached the strip first. They wanted the entire plane, cargo and all. Verde side-slipped to bleed speed, jerked the mixture lever and tumbled the aircraft onto its belly, in a dead-stick landing 30 meters short of the flare line. He broke 2 ribs but crawled away under sporadic gunfire. The rivals torched the empty fuselage out of spite. The cartel accountant deducted the lost aircraft from Verde's future earnings. The ribs were his own problem. He flew again 3 weeks later with a flak vest under his flight suit and a 9mm strapped to his calf. Law enforcement pressure rises, yet the routes mutate faster than bureaucracy. In 2023, Mexico's Air Force loaned King Air 350 ERs, bristling with forward-looking infrared to customs patrols. Seizures spiked for 6 months, then plummeted as smugglers shifted to daylight corridors disguised as humanitarian flights. Blood deliveries, flying doctors, even fake organ transplant transports complete with coolers and counterfeit hospital paperwork. When radar algorithms learned that trick, pilots jumped back to night routes, this time dragging home-built drones as decoys to saturate screens with false targets. Every technological wall becomes another altitude to clear. Treason remains the gravest threat. Cartels punish betrayal with imaginative horror. Waterboarding is classic. A chair, a towel, steady pours of brackish water until the victim feels lungs blossom with liquid. Fingernails boiled off with lye. A rattlesnake stapled inside a burlap sack around the torso. Pilots recount these not to boast but to exorcise nightmares. Verde swears he would rather crash inverted into a canyon than die by his own interrogation tricks. The code is brutal simplicity. La traición se paga con la muerte. Treason is paid with death. There is no installment plan. Yet regret slips through cracks even cartel concrete cannot seal. On a rare afternoon off, Aguila sits in a beachfront cantina where no one knows his face. The sea smells of salt and motor oil, a scent confusingly similar to the ramp. He watches pelicans folding wings into dives and imagines airline uniforms, passenger manifests, safety briefings that end with applause instead of sirens. He calculates how many more flights would clear the debts, buy legitimate certificates, lift his family out of hiding. The answer is always one more than he dares risk, one less than the cartel will demand. He could vanish tonight, fly north, declare asylum, trade routes for witness protection, but disappearances unsettle the hierarchy. When a pilot ghosts, suspicion poisons every radio channel. Somebody would pay, maybe his loader, maybe his cousin who introduced him to the scout, maybe the mistress who knows his safe house address. Quitting feels like hijacking a jet, possible in theory, usually fatal in practice. So the carousel spins. New cadets arrive at flight schools with starched polo shirts and Instagram dreams. Brokers count them like fresh crop. Border demand shows no sign of dieting. US overdose statistics, tragic as they are, barely dent profit curves. Each kilogram lost to seizure is priced into the supply chain like hail damage in apple season. For every aircraft that smokes on a desert floor, another rolls out of a hangar disguised as a medevac. And still each takeoff feels like deliverance. When Aguila's tires unstick and the altimeter ticks alive, the earth shrinks to a luminous thread below his wingtip. Up here, no one lectures him about morals, no one duns him for tuition, no one owns him except gravity, and gravity is merciful as long as the engine holds. For 12, 14, sometimes 18 straight hours, he becomes master of an outlaw physics where lift outruns law, where cargo is currency, where future and past blur into the propeller's hypnotic disc. Only on descent does the cage materialize, runway lights that are really pickup headlights, money that comes wrapped in fresh plastic and old blood, destinies narrowed to a single path. Land, unload, take off, repeat until luck expires. If you listen closely at dawn near Hermosillo, you might hear what sounds like a tractor in the sky. It will fade before you finish a second cup of coffee. By then, Aguila will be skimming a dry arroyo toward shackled fuel drums, cursing the crosswind, lining up a touchdown nobody is supposed to witness. On your drive to work, you will pass a stretch of highway that looks perfectly ordinary except for two faint black streaks the sun hasn't yet bleached away. Those streaks are the only proof that a few hours earlier a man gambled everything on momentum, inertia, and the unspoken agreement that as long as nations buy chemicals to blot boredom, people like him will rise from cactus thorns and fly toward the next flare. And somewhere beyond another border, in a city that deploys far more cash than compassion, a bathroom light will flick on, a bank card will tap a dealer's phone, a narrow straw will tap a trembling nostril, and the cycle will advance one notch, unseen, airborne, unstoppable for as long as the night is wide enough to hide a piston engine's lonely roar.